So within IntelliJ, what I want to do is let me just close all of these tabs. So close all tabs and let's start fresh. So inside of our customer microservice, open up application.yaml. And in here, what I'm going to do is paste this configuration, and you can find this under the description of this video. And also, if you want to learn more about Spring Data JPA, you can check my website where I've got a course on this, teaching you everything you need to know about connecting to databases, joins, how to model your table, queries, so on and so forth. So it's a very in-depth course, which you should take. So in here, what I have is the data source key right here, and within it I do have the username. So this is Amigos Code, and the URL, this is PostgreSQL localhost right here. And the reason why it's localhost is because our application right here, when we start, it's not a container. If it was a container, then we would need to connect via the network. But in here, you can see we also have the port and customer. So I'm going to come back to this in a second. We've got the password, which is password. And then here we have some configuration to set the dialect, format SQL, update when we update our entities, and then show some SQL. Now this customer right here, so this is the name of the database that we have to connect to. So if I go back to pgadmin, inside of databases, create database, and then the owner is Amigos Code, and here let's just say customer. I'm going to say save, and there we go. So now we have this database that we can connect to it. Now the last thing that we have to do is to open up the pom.xml, and in here we brought this dependency, so starter web. So this is for RESTful APIs, but we also want the dependency that allows us to perform queries and interact with our database. So in here, let me just put this full screen, and this is Spring, and then boot, and then starter, and then JPA or data JPA. There we go. And what we also need to bring in is the Postgres driver. So dependency, and this will be PostgreSQL, and this is from org.postgresql. And you can see that this is coming from the parent POM. And in here, I'm going to say that the scope for this is runtime. There we go. Now go ahead and basically reload. So the changes are picked up. If I open up Maven in a second, you should see that we now have data JPA in here, as well as the PostgreSQL driver. So all good. Now let's open up the customer class, and in here we need a couple of things. So one, we need the @ and then entity annotation, and also we need @all args constructor, and also no arg constructor in here. We're not done yet, so we need to annotate this with @ and then ID, and the ID will be based off a sequence. So let's just have the sequence generator and then import sequence generator. And finally, we need to have the generated value, just like so. And let's import the generated value as well as the type. So I think at this point is trying to basically have a star. So here, let me just say type. So generation type, and we are good to go. So with this in place, let's now create a new interface. So this will be customer repository. This will extend, and then JPA repository, where the entity is customer and the data type for the ID is an integer. Now what we need to do is open up the customer service, and inside of this record we're going to inject it, so customer repository, so that we can basically save our customer. And for this to do right here, store customer in DB, let's just say the repository, so repository dot and then save, and then our customer. Job done, and delete this to do. Obviously there are more checks that we have to do, but for now this should basically save customers in our database. Now let's start the application. And hopefully this works. And there we go. You can see that we have some logging, and here create table. So ID, email, first name, last name, and then the key is the primary key is the ID, and we also have the sequence. So this is good stuff. So now what I want you to do is to open up pgadmin, and within Amigos Code databases, customer, and then open up schemas. So we have one schema, and this is the public schema. Open that up, and then we should have one table inside. And in fact, let me just refresh. There we go. And now if I open up tables, have a look. We have the customer table in here, and also the sequence, which is right here. So customer ID sequence. So this is really cool. So if you want, you can basically count the number of rows. So this will give you 0. So there is nothing inside, and you can even basically run queries against this. So you could say, for example, select star from, and then customer, and then run this. And you can see that this gives us back, but you can see that we actually are connected to our database, and we have a table called customer based off our entity. Now what I want to do is send a post request into my API and see whether we can save a customer. So I'm going to use Postman as my REST client, and you can use any other. So in here within Postman, new request to, so this will be a post, and the URL will be localhost, and then 8080 v1 customers, select body, raw, from text to JSON, and in the body, let's have this JSON blob. So first name, last name, email, Jamila Ahmed, J Ahmed, and this JSON object right here corresponds to, so if I go back in here, so corresponds to this guy here. So if I open up the customer registration request, so it maps to this record, first name, last name, and email. So if I go back, and then let's try and send the request and see whether it works. So send, there we go, 200 status code, which means that we most likely have saved this customer to our database. So here, I'm just going to rerun the exact same query and have a look. So now we have Jamila Ahmed in here. So this is beautiful, and you can see that how we now have our microservice connected to its own database.